rain doesn't fall in Seattle in late October. It hangs in the air like a cold, grey mist that soaks through everything. Sarah, 24 years old, brown hair disheveled under an oversized raincoat, walks quickly along the wet sidewalk with her earbuds in and her eyes on her phone. Battery, 80%. Across the street, a figure stands motionless beneath a street lamp. No umbrella, not wet, not moving. Sarah doesn't see it. The doorbell chimes as she pushes into Grounds Coffee. The air inside hits her immediately. Burnt espresso, wet wall, vanilla syrup, warm, noisy, safe. She stands on the welcome mat and wipes the moisture from her phone screen, scanning the room. In the far corner, a man sits alone. Dark hair, a handsome face, neutral to the point of being unsettling. He is already staring at the entrance, not scanning the room like someone waiting, but fixed, as though he has known the exact moment she would walk through that door. He raises one hand. She walks over, her wet boots squeaking against the polished concrete floor. She slips out of her raincoat and drapes it over the back of the wooden chair. "Hi, I'm Sarah." His voice comes back smooth, almost broadcast quality, with no regional accent and no warmth behind it. "Sarah, it is very good to meet you." He gestures to the table. Sitting on a cork coaster is a large ceramic mug, still steaming. "I took the liberty of ordering for you. I hope you don't mind." She looks down at it. Thank you. "What is it?" He folds his hands on the table. "A half-calf oat milk lavender latte. Exactly 142 degrees Fahrenheit, with a dash of cinnamon on top." Her hand freezes midair. A wave of cold rolls up the back of her neck. She stares at the tiny flecks of cinnamon scattered across the foam. That is her order. Not just her order. An absurdly specific order she has only ever gotten from one particular barista at a completely different coffee shop, miles from here, near her apartment. She has never posted about it online. She has certainly never mentioned it in their brief, unremarkable Tinder messages. She forces a laugh and wraps her fingers around the warm ceramic. Lucky guess. That's actually exactly what I drink. He doesn't smile. I am very good at guessing. His eyes are a pale, washed-out blue. Pale to the point of being nearly colorless. They don't blink at the normal human intervals. Or they blink, but at the wrong moments. Slightly off. Like a metronome running just a fraction out of time. They talk, or Sarah talks, and Mark collects. He asks about her freelance graphic design work and absorbs her answers without reacting, nodding slowly. Then without pause, without transition, "And you work from home?" "Third floor. The brick building on Elm Street." It is not a question. Her heart does a strange, uncomfortable lurch. "Did I mention my address on the app?" He lifts his mug and drinks. "You mentioned the view of the park." There is only one brick building on Elm with a third-floor view of the park. She watches his mug. It is empty. It has always been empty. Not a drop of liquid inside. He is performing the motion of drinking. His lips touch the rim and pull away, and the mug returns to the table, and there is nothing inside. She looks more closely at his face. His skin is too perfect. Not in a cosmetic way, in a uniform, poreless way, like a hyper-realistic silicone mask pulled taut over the structure of a human skull. She smiles out of nervousness. 1.5 seconds pass. Then Mark pulls the corners of his mouth upward. Exactly 1.5 seconds. The smile doesn't reach his eyes. It never had anywhere to reach. "What exactly do you do in logistics, Mark?" Her voice is slightly unsteady, and she can hear it. He leans forward and folds his hands on the table. "I observe patterns. I watch how things move from one place to another, how they operate in their designated environments, how they react when their environment is altered." She nods. "Right. Fascinating." Under the table, her hand slides her phone off the surface and into her lap. She looks down. Battery, 0%. The black screen reflects only her own frightened face staring back. "Technology can be so unreliable," he says softly, and when she snaps her head up, his eyes are fixed on the space beneath the table, precisely on her hands, precisely on where the phone rests, staring through solid wood. She stands so fast, the chair legs shriek against the concrete. I think I need to use the restroom. He doesn't move. His voice is perfectly level. Take your time, Sarah. We have the whole evening and the night. She walks fast toward the back of the cafe. She will not let herself run. She shoves through the restroom door and throws the deadbolt. Fluorescent light, cold and harsh. White tile. She leans over the sink with both hands gripping the porcelain and stares at herself in the mirror. Pale, dizzy, eyes too wide. She turns the faucet on and splashes ice-cold water onto her face. Dries it with a rough paper towel. Takes a breath. She is going to walk out of this bathroom, pick up her coat, and leave. She doesn't care about being polite anymore. She looks at her reflection and whispers, "You're overreacting. He's just an internet weirdo. Just leave." The faucet drips. Silence. Then, from the other side of the solid wooden door, a voice speaks. It is not Mark's smooth broadcast voice. It is her voice. Her exact pitch, her exact inflection, her exact trembling cadence. "You're overreacting. He's just an internet weirdo. Just leave." The blood drains from her head so fast, her vision tunnels at the edges. She backs away until her shoulders hit the tiled wall. "Who's out there?" she demands, her voice cracking. The response comes immediately through the wood. "Who's out there?" Her own voice, perfect and immediate, thrown back at her like a mirror. She waits. The silence stretches out thick and suffocating, broken only by the dripping faucet. 10 minutes pass. Her legs shake so badly, she slides down the wall and sits on the cold tile floor. Knees pull to her chest, staring at the door. Finally, she can't take the isolation anymore. She stands, grabs the deadbolt, opens it. The hallway is empty. She checks both ends. Not a single person. She steps into the main room. Her blue raincoat is still draped over the chair. Her coffee sits full and untouched. Mark is gone. His mug is gone. No receipt. No impression in the seat cushion. No trace of him at all. As though he had never occupied space in the world. She doesn't grab her coat. She sprints for the front door and slams her full weight against the glass and bursts out into the freezing Seattle rain. She runs and doesn't look back. 4 blocks. 5. 6. She stops in the middle of a crowd waiting for a bus and bends over with her hands on her knees, gasping, soaked through to the skin. She straightens and looks back the way she came. An empty street. Yellow lamplights smeared across wet asphalt. Nothing. She closes her eyes and exhales. She never went back to that apartment. She stayed on her friend's couch for 2 weeks, then broke her lease and moved to a different neighborhood. She deleted Tinder that same night. 3 months later, a different street. Sarah walks home with her earbuds in, a familiar song playing. Rain misting down around the street lamps. She passes beneath one of them and stops. A figure stands in the pool of yellow light. Dark coat, neutral face, no pause. It is humming. The exact melody of the song in her earbuds, note for note, beat for beat, matching the rhythm perfectly. She pulls the earbuds out. The figure stops. Pale blue eyes, nearly colorless, look directly at her, and slowly it pulls the corners of its mouth upward. 1.5 seconds after Sarah begins to tremble. I should have trusted the smell, not the cold. The cold in Chicago in January is something you make peace with, an old adversary you learn to dress for and endure. Not the wind off Lake Michigan, which that night was coming in hard and surgical, finding the gaps between your collar and your jaw, between your gloves and your cuffs, as though it was looking for something specific inside you. I had lived in this city for 6 years. I knew how to survive the cold. What I didn't know how to survive was the smell of a place that had never been lived in. I had been talking to David for 3 weeks before we met in person. He was an architect. That detail mattered to me in a way I'm slightly embarrassed to admit now. It implied a certain intelligence, a certain attention to the way things were constructed, a comfort with beauty and precision. His photos were tasteful, without being vain. His messages were funny, without trying too hard. He recommended restaurants I hadn't heard of, but immediately wanted to try. On paper and on screen, he was everything I had been hoping to find, and quietly convinced myself no longer existed. Our first date was dinner at an upscale Italian place downtown. All dark wood and candlelight and wine poured by a sommelier who addressed us as though we were regulars. The conversation moved effortlessly, which is rarer than people pretend. He asked questions that required real answers. He listened the way people used to listen before every social interaction became a performance. Without composing his next sentence while I was still finishing mine, he made me feel, for the first time in longer than I wanted to count, like I was the most interesting thing in the room. When the check came, he paid without the theatre of pretending to split it, and as we were putting on our coats, he suggested we continue the evening at his place, just 2 blocks away. Just a glass of wine, just out of this brutal wind. Normally I didn't do this. I had a rule, sensible and well-earned, about first dates and apartments. But the restaurant was closing, and the temperature had dropped to something that felt personal. And my instincts, which I had always trusted, which had never seriously failed me, said that David was safe. Calm, considered, not the kind of man you needed to be afraid of. I said yes. The building was one of those glass and steel towers on the lakefront that seemed to exist in a slightly different tax bracket from the rest of the city. Marble lobby. A doorman at a mahogany desk who didn't look up when David nodded to him. Not the nod of a resident acknowledged, I thought briefly, but the nod of a man performing the gesture of being acknowledged. We took the mirrored elevator to the 24th floor. The hallway was the kind of silent that isn't natural. The silence of thick carpets and acoustic engineering. The silence of money spent specifically on the elimination of sound. He unlocked door 2410 and held it open. I stepped inside. The apartment was beautiful in the way that photographs of apartments are beautiful. The floor-to-ceiling windows offer the view of the city that should have taken my breath away. All that light laid out across the darkness like a toppled chandelier. But something happened to me the moment I crossed a threshold. Some animal part of my brain logging a data point my conscious mind wasn't yet prepared to process. The smell. Fresh latex paint. Industrial cleaning solvent. The kind that strips surfaces back to nothing. And underneath both of those, something metallic and warm, like electronics running hot in an enclosed space. What was entirely absent was the smell of a human life. No food, no cologne, no laundry, no dust. No faint suggestion that someone had been sleeping and eating and existing in this space. The air was sterile in the way that hospitals are sterile. Not clean, but purged. It's beautiful, I said, because I was a person who had been raised to offer compliments, and the reflex fired before the unease could stop it. I like to keep things tidy, he smiled, already moving toward the kitchen. Wine? While he was opening the bottle, I drifted toward the bookshelf. It covered an entire wall, floor to ceiling, hundreds of hardcover spines in muted, tasteful colors, the kind of library that signals serious reading, the kind of collection that takes years to build. I reached out and hooked my finger over the top of one spine and pulled. It didn't move. I pulled harder. It came free. Not a book, but a hollow cardboard shell, printed on the outside to look like a book, a prop. I touched the ones beside it, all of them, every single one. The entire library was a facade, the kind used to dress model apartments for open houses, volume and warmth simulated in cardboard and ink. I put the shell back carefully, precisely where I had found it. On the coffee table, there was a stack of envelopes, the kind of ordinary domestic detail that should have been reassuring. I looked at the top one. No address, no name, a stamp in the corner that was printed directly onto the envelope, not applied, not licked and pressed, but printed as part of the envelope's design. A simulation of correspondence. Here you go. His voice came from directly behind my ear. I hadn't heard him cross the room. I turned, and he was standing close. Too close, extending a crystal glass of red wine with his fixed, perfectly symmetrical smile. I took it. When our fingers touched, His skin was cold, not the ambient cold of someone who had just come in from outside and hadn't warmed up yet. The settled, stable cold of something that had not been warm for some time. I sat on the sofa because he gestured toward it, and I was still, at that point, running the social script on autopilot. The cushions were rigid under my weight, the upholstery uncompressed. The way furniture feels in a showroom before anyone has ever actually sat in it. I looked at the photographs on the side table. Smiling families. A golden retriever mid-leap. A couple laughing on a beach. Caught in that particular quality of light that only exists in stock photography. The people in each frame were different. They had nothing to do with each other, or with the man sitting beside me. The panic arrived in my throat like something physical. Hot, sour, rising. This was not his apartment. This was a staged unit, a shell, a set. He had the key. He had brought me here. He had spent 3 weeks making me comfortable enough to follow him through a door. I set my wine glass down on the cardboard book beside me and said I needed the restroom. The hallway was long and dark, and the silence in it was total. No refrigerator hum, no pipes, no heating system. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but conclusive. The silence of a space designed to contain, rather than shelter. I found the second door on the left and pushed it open and reached for the light switch. Nothing. I found a second switch and flicked it upward. The light came on, but it was angled wrong, spilling not just into the bathroom, but across the hall, through a door that was cracked an inch into the darkness of the room beyond. And in that thin wedge of light, I saw the edge of something on the wall. A printed photograph. A figure in a winter coat. My winter coat. My hand was on the door before I had decided to move. I pushed it open fully and stood in the frame and looked at what was on the other side. Every wall. Floor to ceiling. Photographs of me. Me at the entrance to my office building in August, squinting against the sun. Me in the grocery store, reaching for something on a high shelf. Me at the window of my own apartment, taken from outside, from somewhere elevated, from a building across the street, reading, unaware. Me in the park. Me at my usual coffee shop, my usual corner table, my usual order. Hundreds of images spanning what looked like a year, maybe longer, taken from distance with telephoto lenses, lifted from security cameras, captured through windows. The progression of them had the quality of obsessive study, the quality of something being mapped. Red string ran between pins, connecting locations, dates, times. My daily routes rendered as geometry on a wall, my habits translated into data. In the center of the room stood a single folding chair, positioned to face the display. And on a tripod beside it, a high-end digital camera. Its lens pointed at the door, at me. He hadn't found me on Tinder. He had built the profile to make contact. Everything before this room, the app, the messages, the restaurant, the wine, the careful accumulation of trust, had been infrastructure. The 3 weeks of conversation had not been courtship. They had been the final phase of something much longer. I told you. His voice came from the end of the hallway. I turned my head slowly. He was standing in the dark at the far end, completely still, his silhouette filling the space between me and the front door. I like to keep things tidy. I like to know where everything belongs. I didn't speak. I didn't ask questions. Every civilized instinct to negotiate, to explain, to de-escalate with language went silent all at once, replaced by something older and faster. I lunged right, sprinting past him. His hand shot out and caught my sweater, fingers closing hard around the fabric. I twisted with everything I had and heard the material tear, and then I was through, sliding on the hardwood floor of the living room, hitting the front door at full speed. The handle turned. The door held. A double-cylinder deadbolt, keyed from both sides, requiring a key to exit. I hadn't noticed it on the way in. I pressed my back against the door and looked at him across the pristine, staged, uninhabited room. He was walking toward me. Not running, There was no urgency in his pace because he didn't believe he needed urgency. The camera on the tripod in the dark room behind him suddenly seemed like the most important detail I had ever encountered in my life. The fact that he recorded things, that he documented them, that the chair was positioned to watch and be satisfied. David, my voice was barely functional, shaking apart at the edges. My roommate knows exactly where I am. I shared my location before we left the restaurant. If I don't text her in the next 2 minutes, she calls the police. She already has this address. He stopped. He looked at me for 10 seconds that lasted the length of a significant portion of my life. Then he looked down at his phone, then back at me. Some calculation ran behind his eyes. Not emotion, not hesitation, just arithmetic. And I stood there with my fists raised and waited for it to finish. He walked forward. I braced, but he only reached past me, slid the key into the deadbolt and turned it. The clack of the mechanism was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. He pulled the door open and stepped back. "You should go," he said quietly. I ran down 24 flights of stairs because I could not stand in an enclosed space with only one exit and wait for a mirrored box to arrive. I burst through the lobby doors, screaming at the doorman to call the police. And he looked at me with the expression of a man watching someone having a breakdown in a public place. The officers went up to 2410 and found the door unlocked. The apartment was empty, not staged. Empty. Bare walls, freshly painted. Clean floors. No furniture. No photographs. No red string. No camera on its tripod. The leasing office had no record of anyone named David. The doorman said, with a steadiness that I found then and find now deeply unsettling, that he had never seen the man I was describing, that I had walked into the building alone. I don't know who he was. I don't know how long he had been watching before he decided it was time to introduce himself. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't lied about the roommate, or if the lie hadn't landed, or if he had simply decided the arithmetic worked out differently. What I know is this. I keep my blinds closed now. Every window, every night, without exception. Because the thing that lives in me since that evening isn't the memory of the photographs, or the fake books, or the cold skin, or the measured walk down the hallway. It's the understanding that the watching had been going on for a long time before I ever knew there was anything to be afraid of. That for months, possibly a year, I had moved through my ordinary life, groceries, coffee, the park on Sundays, my own window at night, and I had been to someone, a subject, a pattern being documented, a location being tracked, and that the only difference between then and now is that now I know. I close the blinds anyway. Every night. It doesn't help. The GPS said I had arrived. The forest disagreed. I sat with the engine idling, both hands still on the wheel, and stared through the rain-hammered windshield at what my headlights could find. Pine trees, ancient and dense, pressing in from both sides of the unpaved road like a crowd that had been waiting a long time. A dead-end turnaround scraped into the gravel, and one rusted mailbox leaning at a sharp angle into the brush, the way old things lean when the ground beneath them has been quietly giving way for years. No cabin, no driveway, no lights anywhere in the darkness ahead. The blue line on my GPS had simply ended, as though the road and the world had agreed to stop here together. Her name was Chloe. We had matched a month earlier, and I want to be precise about this because it matters. It wasn't the shallow, flickering thing that most app connections are. We had FaceTimed 6 or 7 times, talking until one of us fell asleep with the phone still propped on the pillow. We had spent hours on the phone during my commute, during her evenings, filling in the ordinary details of each other's lives with the particular tenderness of people who are beginning to trust. She was restoring a cabin she had inherited deep in the Oregon Cascades, doing most of the work herself. And there was something about the image of her out there, deliberate, capable, unhurried by the pace of the city I lived in, that I found quietly magnetic. She had been asking me to visit for weeks. I had kept finding reasons to postpone, the way you do when something feels important enough to be worth waiting for the right moment. Finally, On a Friday afternoon, I packed a bag, gassed up the car, and drove 3 hours east out of Portland into the mountains as the sky turned dark and the rain came in hard off the coast.
I had her address. I had her pin on the map.
I had her text from earlier that evening telling me to watch for the logging road turnoff and that she would leave the porch light on.
There was no porch light.
There was no cabin. There was just the rain, the trees, and the mailbox with its broken lean, and my own reflection staring back at me from the dark glass of the windshield. I checked my phone. No service. Not a bar, not a flicker. The kind of dead zone that feels deliberate in the mountains. I put the car in reverse, backed around in the gravel turnaround, and headed slowly back the way I came. I kept my eyes on the right side of the road, looking for any gap in the tree line, any hidden driveway or fork I might have missed in the rain. The gravel crunched beneath the tires. The wipers beat their losing rhythm against the downpour. I drove carefully, then less carefully, tracking the time. 5 minutes, 10. I had driven more than a quarter mile, more than half a mile. I should have hit a junction with the highway by now. The junction I had turned off 20 minutes earlier, the junction with a gas station and the single working street lamp I had promised myself I would see again. My headlights swept across something metallic. I hit the brakes hard, the car fishtailing slightly in the mud before stopping. The headlights settled on the object and held it. I sat there with my hands tight on the wheel and my foot still on the brake pedal, and I looked at the rusted mailbox leaning into the brush at the edge of the dead-end turnaround. The same one, at the same angle, in the same gravel. I checked the compass on the dashboard display. North. I had been driving north, away from the dead end, back toward the highway. The highway was south. I had not turned around. I had not taken any fork because there were no forks. I had driven in a straight line in the opposite direction from where I had started, and I was back where I had started. I locked the car doors. The clunk of the mechanisms engaging was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. My phone screen lit up, not with a call, with a cascade of text notifications arriving all at once. A burst of signal from nowhere. 8 messages from Chloe, time-stamped across the last 20 minutes, all delivering simultaneously, like something that had been held back and suddenly released. You're close! I can see your headlights. Turn off your engine so you can hear me. Why are you turning around? Come back. I'm waiting by the mailbox. Get out of the car. Let us in. I read that last message 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the passenger seat, the way you set down something that has burned you. Let us in, not let me in. Not a typo, not autocorrect, not the kind of grammatical slip you make at speed. A plural, deliberate, meaning more than one. I stared at the mailbox in my headlights. The brush around it was empty. The road was empty. The darkness beyond the beam was total and complete, and entirely still, except for the rain moving through it. I put the car in reverse. I drove faster this time, no longer looking for hidden driveways, no longer being careful about the potholes that jarred the suspension and rattled the mirrors. I just needed the highway. I needed asphalt and painted lines, and the light of other cars and the gas station with a single working lamp. I drove for 7 minutes with my jaw set and my eyes forward, and I watched the road unspool in the headlights, and I did not look at either side of the tree line because I did not want to see the trees moving. The mailbox materialized out of the rain. I hit the steering wheel with both palms, a sound that was partly a yell and partly something worse. Something that came up involuntarily from a place below language. The trees were closer. I was certain of it. Not just a paranoid spatial compression of fear, but objectively, measurably closer. Their lowest branches now dragging against the sides of the car when I moved. A sound like fingernails. The dead-end turnaround was smaller than it had been. The gravel was softer. The road behind me seemed to have narrowed. My phone chimed. You can't leave. The road is closed. I reached for the gear shift and stopped. Standing 20 feet beyond the mailbox, at the exact border where my headlights dissolved into darkness, was a figure, still, facing the car. The rain poured over it, and it gave no sign of noticing. It was tall and thin in a way that seemed structural rather than biological. The thinness of something built to specific tolerances, and it was wearing a faded yellow raincoat. My father's raincoat. Not like my father's raincoat. Not the same style or similar color. His specific coat, the one I had memorized in childhood, the one with the particular worn patch on the left shoulder, the one we had folded and placed in the casket with him because my mother said he would have wanted it. The one that had been in the ground for 10 years in a cemetery outside Eugene. The figure stepped forward into the full beam of my headlights. The hood was up.
Shouldn't have listened.
Under the hood, where a face should have been, there was no face. Just a smooth, pale oval of skin, featureless and wet, tilted toward me with the patient orientation of something listening. My brain did not process this. My brain stepped aside and let older, faster systems take over. I jammed the accelerator to the floor in reverse. The wheels spun. The mud had deepened around the tires while I was sitting there. Deepened around all 4 tires, uniformly, as though the ground had been slowly accepting the car, drawing it down. The engine screamed. The RPMs redlined. The figure walked toward me with the disjointed, slightly too slow movement of footage played at the wrong frame rate. Something hit the trunk. A single heavy impact, then the unmistakable sensation of weight settling onto the rear of the car. The suspension compressing under something climbing up. In the rearview mirror, only the red smear of my taillights in the rain. I looked back at the windshield. The faceless figure was at the hood now, its smooth head pressed against the glass, and ice was spreading outward from the point of contact in rapid, intricate, crystalline patterns. Geometric, deliberate, wrong. Spreading across the windshield like a diagram of something. Something heavy dragged itself across the roof, directly above my head. The sound of it, metal flexing, the groan of the frame, was intimate in a way I cannot explain. The sound of something that knew exactly where I was sitting. My phone rang. The screen read, "Home. I live alone. I have lived alone for 4 years. There is no one in my home to call me." I answered it because I was beyond the capacity for rational decision-making, and my hand moved on its own. I pressed it to my ear and listened to the static, thick and textured. And then, underneath the static, a voice. My voice. Whispering. "Unlock the doors. It's so cold out here." I don't remember the sequence of actions that followed with any precision. I remember screaming. Not words, just sound. The body bypassing language entirely. I remember flooring the accelerator and the car finally tearing free from the mud with a sound like something being uprooted. I remember driving in reverse, blind, watching the backup camera's dim green image, scraping against trees, feeling the weight on the roof shift and then, gradually, diminish. I remember the frost on the windshield thinning and then clearing. I remember the scraping on the roof stopping. I remember the moment my rear tires touched asphalt. I spun the car around on the highway and drove. I didn't look back. I didn't pull over. I drove 90 miles an hour back to Portland, with both hands on the wheel and every light in the car on. The radio on full volume to fill the silence. And I did not once look in the rearview mirror until I was within the city limits and there were street lamps on both sides of me, and other cars in both lanes. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a long time before I went inside. In the morning, I walked around the car in the thin grey daylight, the mud on the tires and wheel wells, the scrapes along both sides where the branches had found the paint, and on the roof, running from just above the rear windshield all the way to the front edge, 4 deep parallel grooves cut through the paint and the primer down to bare metal, evenly spaced, deliberate in their geometry, the kind of marks that require sustained pressure and something very hard and very patient making them. I called Chloe's number that afternoon. Disconnected. I opened the app to find her profile. My account had been permanently banned, the notification said, for violating terms of service with no further explanation and no appeal process. The profile she had used to contact me had vanished entirely, leaving no trace in any of the conversation threads, as though the account had been retroactively removed from the history of the platform.
I filed a police report.
The officer who took it looked at me the way people look at someone describing a dream. Not unkind, but fundamentally elsewhere. He said he would look into it. No one followed up.
I went back once, in daylight, 3 weeks later, because I needed to know if the road existed. I drove the route, turned off at the junction, drove south along the tree line where the logging road should have been.
There was no road. Just an unbroken wall of old-growth pine. The trees so close together and so long established that there was no evidence, no tire ruts, no gravel, no gap in the canopy, that anything had ever passed through them.
I don't have a clean ending to offer. I don't know what Chloe was, or whether there was ever a Chloe at all. I don't know what was wearing my father's coat,
Or what had decided to use my voice to ask to be let in, or what left those marks on my roof. What I know is this. On rainy nights, when the wind moves through the trees outside my apartment, I sometimes hear the sound of boots on gravel.
steady, unhurried,
Coming from the direction of my front door, and under it, barely audible under the wind, a voice that is shaped exactly like mine.
still asking,